Aquarius, this is not a prediction. And it's not a warning. This is something quieter than that. If you clicked on this video, it's not because you were curious. It's because something in you recognized the moment. You've spent most of your life being the stable one, the one who thinks ahead, the one who carries weight no one talks about. And yet no one ever told you that you were the turning point. Not the loud success story, not the dramatic breakthrough, but the first one in your lineage who no longer has to survive to feel safe. January doesn't arrive with fireworks for you. It arrives with permission. Permission to want more without guilt, without explanation, without apology. If this is landing in your body right now, leave a comment and simply write "I receive," because what's unfolding next isn't about money. It's about the quiet moment you realize your life was never meant to look like the past. And this is where that realization begins. All right, stay right here with me. I'm not speaking to an audience now. I'm speaking to you. There's a particular kind of stillness that settles in when a soul has walked far enough to stop running. You didn't arrive here with urgency in your chest. You arrived with recognition. That soft internal click that says, I know this space. I've stood here before. Not in this lifetime maybe, but somewhere deeper than memory. Aquarius, you've always had an unusual relationship with time. While others move forward in straight lines, you feel things in layers. Passion and possibility often overlap inside you. That's why this moment doesn't feel new. It feels familiar in the way a long hallway feels familiar even when the lights are low. There's no promise being made to you here, no declaration of sudden change. What's happening is quieter than that. It's an internal alignment. Like the moment your shoulders drop without you realizing you were holding them up for years. You've spent much of your life sensing what others couldn't name, reading rooms before anyone spoke, carrying emotional whether that wasn't yours, but somehow became your responsibility. You learned early how to be composed, how to be rational, how to be fine. And yet beneath that calm exterior, there has always been a private knowing, a sense that you were never meant to simply maintain what already existed, that your presence itself alters the atmosphere, that when you enter a space, something subtle reorganizes. This isn't ego, it's design. Some people are born to protect the structure. Others are born to question it gently, without burning it down. You belong to the second kind, the quiet architects, the ones who don't announce change, but embody it slowly until the world adjusts around them. Have you noticed how often life places you at crossroads that don't look dramatic on the outside? Moments where nothing visibly happens, yet everything inside you shifts by a few degrees. Those are not small moments. Those are pivots. And this one feels different. Not heavier, not louder, just clearer. There's a growing sense that you don't need to explain yourself as much anymore, that not everyone needs access to your inner world, that some doors are meant to close not out of fear, but out of self-respect. This realization doesn't rush in, it unfolds, like dawn arriving while the city is still asleep. You may not have language for it yet, but your body already knows. Your nervous system recognizes safety in a new way, not safety through control, safety through choice. And I wonder, when was the last time you allowed yourself to imagine a life that didn't require you to be strong all the time? Not a fantasy, a grounded, breathable reality. Stay with that question for a moment. You don't need to answer it, just let it exist beside you. Because what we're stepping into now is not about fixing anything. It's about remembering something essential that was never lost. And as this awareness settles in, you'll start to notice how quietly your inner world begins to reorganize itself. Without force, without struggle. That's when the real story starts to reveal itself. Stay with me a little longer. Let the silence stretch just enough to feel safe. There's something about you that people rarely say out loud, but they sense it the moment they're near you. You hold things together, not loudly, not dramatically, just steadily, like an unseen beam inside a house that no one notices until it's gone. You learned early how to read what was needed without being asked, how to adjust yourself so the room could breathe easier, how to become the calm one when emotions ran high. Somewhere along the way, that skill stopped being a choice and became a role you quietly stepped into every day. And you did it well, too well. You became the one people leaned on when systems felt fragile, the one who thought 10 steps ahead so others wouldn't have to panic, the one who absorbed tension and translated chaos into something manageable, not because you were told to, but because you could. What's rarely acknowledged is the cost of that kind of competence. When you are the one who steadies the ground, no one thinks to ask how the ground feels beneath your own feet. When you carry perspective, you are expected to carry endurance too. You learned to be reliable before you learned how to rest. You learned to be rational before you learned how to be held. There's a quiet exhaustion that comes from being the emotional infrastructure of a family or a system. Not the kind that puts you to sleep early. The kind that makes you forget what it feels like to need something without explaining why. You've carried responsibilities that never had names. Expectations that were never spoken but somehow always yours. You didn't complain because you understood the bigger picture. You didn't step away because you knew what would collapse if you did. And still somewhere inside you, there has been a muted ache. Not resentment, not anger. Just a low, persistent question that surfaces in quiet moments. Is this all I meant to hold? You rarely allow yourself to feel tired, not because you're not, but because being tired feels like letting someone down. So you normalize it, you call it maturity, you call it strength. But strength was never meant to be permanent tension. There's a difference between being capable and being overextended, between being supportive and being invisible to yourself. And lately, something in you has been noticing that difference more clearly. You may not have spoken it yet, but your body has. In the pauses that linger longer than they used to. In the way you no longer rush to fill silence. In the subtle resistance to carrying what was never meant to be yours forever. Let me ask you something gently. If you were no longer responsible for keeping everything stable, who would you become in the quiet that followed? This isn't about stepping away from love. It's about stepping back into yourself. About recognizing that the role you mastered was never your identity. It was a season. And as that understanding begins to settle, not with urgency but with relief, you may feel something unexpected. Permission. Not from others. From within. Because you were never meant to be the strongest one in the room forever. You were meant to evolve beyond the role that taught you strength in the first place. And that shift, subtle as it is, changes everything that comes next. Let that permission linger for a moment. Not as a thought, as a feeling in your chest. Because once you begin to loosen your grip on a role, something older quietly steps forward. Something you did not choose consciously. Something that chose you long before you understood what it was asking. There is a pattern that runs through your family line. Not written down. Not discussed over dinner. But carried in tone. In posture, in what was praised and what was discouraged. A quiet agreement passed from one generation to the next. To be safe, you endure. To belong, you soften your edges. To be loved, you do not disrupt what already exists. You learned this without instruction. You watched how difference was treated. How dreams were trimmed to fit practical shapes. How survival was honored more than fulfillment. And somewhere along the way, without ceremony, you signed on. Not with words, with silence, with patience. With the careful folding of parts of yourself that felt too expansive for the room, you became skilled at minimizing what made you unusual. Not because you doubted it, but because you understood the cost of being fully seen in a system that had no language for you. So you adapted. You learned to translate your vision into something less threatening. You learned to wait. What most people never realize is that endurance can look like loyalty, and suppression can masquerade as love. But Aquarius, there is a difference between honoring your roots and living inside their limitations. The contract you inherited was built for another era. Another set of fears. Another understanding of what it meant to survive. You are not here to break it violently. You are here to outgrow it. There comes a moment when the old agreement starts to feel tight around the edges. Not painful. Just restrictive. Like clothes that once fit perfectly, but no longer allow you to breathe deeply. You may feel it when you hesitate before sharing an idea. When you sense yourself shrinking in familiar spaces. When a quiet voice inside asks why ease still feels undeserved. That voice is not rebellion, it is evolution. Every lineage eventually produces someone who can see the system from the inside and the outside at the same time. Someone who understands the rules and also senses their expiration date. That someone is rarely the loudest. They are the ones who pause, who reflect, who feel the weight of continuity and the pull of possibility simultaneously. That tension you feel is not betrayal. It is responsibility at a higher octave. Let me ask you something gently. If your life were no longer required to justify the sacrifices of those before you, what would you allow yourself to build instead? You are not erasing your family story. You are adding a chapter they could not imagine. One where stability does not require self-denial, where acceptance does not demand disappearance, where safety and self-expression are no longer opposites. This is how systems truly change, not through rejection, through expansion. And as this realization settles, you may notice something subtle but powerful. A release. As if a long-standing obligation quietly dissolves without conflict. You are still connected, still grateful, still rooted, but no longer bound by an agreement that asked you to stay smaller than your capacity. That is the beginning of an upgrade. Not just for you, but for everything that flows through you next. Stay right here with me. Let what just softened inside you settle without naming it. Because when the old obligation loosens its grip, space appears. And in that space, a new definition begins to take shape quietly, without announcement. When you hear the phrase first millionaire, your mind may instinctively reach for numbers, balances, milestones, proof. That reaction makes sense. You grew up in a world where worth was often measured by what could be counted. But what is forming around you now is different. It does not arrive with urgency or spectacle. It feels more like exhaling after holding your breath for decades. Real wealth, the kind that lasts beyond one lifetime, begins as a way of moving through the day. It shows up in how you wake up without dread sitting on your chest, in how your body is no longer treated like a machine meant to be pushed until it breaks, in how rest stops feeling like something you must earn. You are learning something your lineage never had the chance to learn. That survival is not the same as living. That exhaustion is not evidence of devotion. That peace is not laziness. For a long time, struggle was worn like a badge of honor. Working harder than necessary became a form of morality. Sacrificing yourself was framed as love. And somewhere along the way, ease began to feel suspicious. You are here to gently dismantle that belief, not by rejecting effort, but by redefining what effort is for. The wealth you are stepping into is a state of internal permission. Permission to want more without shame. Permission to build a life that supports you instead of draining you. Permission to succeed without needing to justify why you deserve it. This is not about excess. It is about sufficiency that feels calm. It is about freedom that does not come with collapse on the other side. Notice how your nervous system responds when you imagine a life where rest is built into the structure, where ambition and well-being coexist, where you do not have to lose yourself to be considered successful. That response matters. It is intelligence beyond thought. You are breaking a pattern that says value must be earned through depletion. You are interrupting an emotional inheritance that equated struggle with worth. And you are doing it not through force but through choice. This is how generational change actually happens. One person decides that burnout is not a legacy they want to pass on. One person decides that abundance includes time, health, and clarity. One person decides to stop glorifying survival. Let me ask you something softly. If your life no longer had to prove resilience, what would it be free to express instead? You may feel moments of guilt as this shift takes hold. That is normal. Guilt often appears when old identities begin to dissolve. But guilt is not a signal to turn back. It is a sign that you are stepping beyond a familiar boundary. You are not abandoning anyone by choosing a better way. You are showing what is possible. This is the kind of wealth that does not make noise. It stabilizes quietly. It supports silently. It changes everything downstream. And as this understanding settles into you, not as an idea but as a posture toward life, you may sense what is coming next. A subtle realignment. A quieter rhythm. A shift that does not demand effort, only honesty. That is where the next layer begins to reveal itself. Stay with that sense of honesty you just touched. It doesn't rush you forward. It steadies you. Because what's happening now is not an event. It's an internal weather change. Subtle enough that others may not notice. Precise enough that you feel it in the way your breath moves through your body. This season carries a quieter frequency. Not dramatic. Not demanding. It asks you to slow the pace just enough to hear yourself again. There is no sudden miracle arriving at your door. No sharp turn that forces a decision. What's unfolding is almost ordinary on the surface, and deeply transformative underneath. You begin to notice how your relationship with yourself has shifted. The inner dialogue softens. The urgency fades. You stop scanning the horizon for permission. You no longer need everything to make sense before you move. You no longer need guarantees to trust what feels aligned. Something in you understands that clarity doesn't come from waiting. It comes from choosing. January carries the energy of refinement. It strips away excess without struggle. It asks fewer questions and gives cleaner answers. Not because the world is simpler, but because you are more precise. You find yourself saying no without rehearsing explanations. Yes without defending it. Silence without filling it. And there is relief in that. Not relief that celebrates loudly. Relief that settles into your nervous system like warmth. This is the kind of shift that happens when you stop performing readiness and start inhabiting it. When you no longer ask if the timing is perfect. When you recognize that waiting has become unnecessary, you may notice your world becoming smaller in a way that feels intentional. Fewer distractions. Fewer emotional negotiations. Fewer obligations that never truly belong to you. This narrowing is not loss. It is focus. There is an elegance to this phase. You conserve energy not out of fear, but out of respect for yourself. You listen more closely to what drains you and what restores you. You choose based on resonance rather than obligation. And quietly, almost without ceremony, a threshold is crossed. You stop postponing your life. Not because everything is ready, but because you are. Let me ask you something gently. What changed when you stopped asking for the right moment and simply allowed yourself to step forward? This permission you're giving yourself does not shout. It does not announce its arrival. It shows up in consistency, in boundaries that feel natural instead of rigid, in decisions that no longer require justification. You are not becoming someone new. You are returning to a pace that fits you. Others may interpret this shift as distance, as detachment, as change they can't quite name. But what they are sensing is your alignment. You are no longer negotiating your worth through over-explanation. You are no longer proving your seriousness through exhaustion. You are no longer postponing peace in exchange for potential. This is a recalibration, a quiet agreement with yourself that life does not need to be loud to be meaningful. That progress does not need to be painful to be real. And as this steadier rhythm takes hold, something else begins to emerge, a deeper confidence. Not the kind that pushes forward, the kind that allows. That allowance creates space for what has been waiting patiently in the background. Opportunities that recognize you where you are now. Connections that meet you without demand. A future that doesn't ask you to abandon yourself to reach it. This is how the shift announces itself, not with noise, with truth. And as you settle into this quieter clarity, you may sense that another layer is preparing to surface. One that asks not what you can endure next, but what you are finally ready to receive. Let that quieter rhythm hold you for a moment. Notice how it doesn't pull, it invites. Because once you allow yourself to live with less resistance, a new emotion often rises to the surface. Not fear, not doubt, but guilt. Soft, persistent, easy to ignore until it asks to be heard. Aquarius, you've likely felt this before. That strange heaviness that appears when life starts to feel lighter. When ease shows up and part of you wonders if you're allowed to keep it. As if comfort must always be explained. As if peace requires a justification. This guilt didn't come from nowhere. It formed quietly in rooms where wanting more was seen as ungrateful. In families where stability was fragile and ambition felt risky. Where doing better than the generation before you came with an unspoken question. Who do you think you are? You learn to measure your desires carefully. To soften them, to edit them before they reached the surface, not because you lacked vision, but because you didn't want to hurt anyone by growing beyond what they knew. There is a particular tenderness in you, a sensitivity to the emotional balance of others. You sense when your expansion creates contrast, and sometimes, without realizing it, you interpret that contrast as harm. But growth is not abandonment, and wanting more is not betrayal. The fear that you might leave someone behind often comes from love, from loyalty, from a deep awareness of where you come from. Yet love does not require you to stay confined to old limitations. Think about this quietly. When one person in a family learns to breathe easier, does the air not change for everyone? You are not stepping away from your roots. You are strengthening them by choosing a healthier way to live. By showing that stability does not have to come at the cost of joy. That abundance can be gentle. That success does not need to feel heavy. The guilt you feel is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are doing something new. Your nervous system is adjusting to a reality where effort and reward are not always equal in strain, where life begins to respond without constant proving. That unfamiliar ease can feel undeserved at first. But you did not arrive here by accident. You arrived through years of awareness, restraint, insight, and inner work that no one applauded. You earned this not through exhaustion, but through evolution. Let me ask you something softly. If living well no longer required apology, what would you allow yourself to enjoy fully? There is a quiet responsibility that comes with being the one who goes first. Not the loud first, the gentle first, the one who demonstrates that a different rhythm is possible. You are not responsible for carrying everyone with you, but you are powerful enough to show what is possible without forcing anyone to follow. Your ease gives others permission. Your boundaries model self-respect. Your fullness expands the emotional range of the entire lineage. This is how healing travels, not through sacrifice, through example. As you release the idea that your comfort takes something away from others, you may feel a subtle shift inside, a softening, a relief that doesn't need to be shared to be real. You are not leaving anyone behind, you are lighting the path. And as that understanding settles deeper, another realization begins to form. Receiving is not selfish. It is the natural continuation of all you have already given. That truth prepares you for the next opening. One that asks not whether you deserve more, but whether you are ready to receive without apology. Let that truth rest where it landed, not as a lesson, as a quiet recognition. Because once guilt loosens its hold, something else begins to surface, not urgency, not hunger, but openness. The kind that feels unfamiliar when you have spent so long earning every good thing. You are learning a different posture now, one that does not brace before receiving. One that does not flinch when life offers something gentle. For a long time, receiving felt like a negotiation. You took in small portions. You explained your reasons. You softened your needs so they would not inconvenience anyone else. Even joy was filtered, measured, accepted carefully. But something has shifted in you, not dramatically, internally. You are beginning to notice how often you used to apologize without words. For taking space. For resting. For being supported. For allowing life to meet you halfway. That reflex did not come from arrogance or fear. It came from having to prove your place. From believing that worth must always be demonstrated before it can be received. Yet the kind of wealth forming around you now does not respond to effort alone. It responds to presence, to steadiness, to the quiet authority of someone who no longer needs to explain their value. Receiving without apology does not mean becoming careless or entitled. It means staying open when something arrives without struggle. It means letting a compliment land without deflecting it. Letting support exist without immediately planning repayment. Letting ease stay a little longer than feels familiar. You may notice resistance at first, a subtle tightening when things go smoothly, a reflex to search for what you might be missing. That is old conditioning dissolving. You were trained to survive, not to receive. But survival is no longer the skill being asked of you. Discernment is. Presence is. Trust is. When you stop asking for permission to live well, something remarkable happens. Life begins to mirror the inner stability you have been cultivating quietly for years. Opportunities arrive that do not demand self-sacrifice. Connections appear that do not require you to perform strength. Resources show up without chaos attached to them. This is not coincidence. It is resonance. The world responds differently to someone who is no longer negotiating their right to exist comfortably. You carry yourself differently now. Less urgency, less explanation, more clarity. And clarity has a gravity of its own. Let me ask you something gently. What would change if you allowed yourself to receive without immediately preparing to justify it? This is not about passivity. You are still intentional, still aware, still discerning. But you are no longer auditioning for your own life. There is a quiet dignity in this phase. You accept what aligns and release what does not without defense. You recognize that being supported does not make you weak. It makes you sustainable. This is the moment when effort gives way to alignment. When what you built internally begins to show up externally. Not because you demanded it, but because you are ready to hold it without collapsing or over-explaining. Receiving without apology is not the end of the journey. It is a threshold. Beyond it lies a life that does not ask you to repeat old patterns to feel secure. A life that recognizes you as you are now. Grounded, clear, quietly powerful. And as you stand here, allowing rather than chasing, something else begins to take shape on the horizon. A deeper confirmation. A sense that you were never late, never behind. Only preparing for the moment when receiving would finally feel natural. Stay with me here, not to arrive anywhere. Just to breathe inside this moment. There is a strange peace that comes after you stop explaining yourself to the past. It feels unfamiliar at first, like standing still while the world keeps moving. But inside that stillness, something important becomes clear. You were never late. Not to love. Not to purpose. Not to the life that has been quietly preparing space for you. You simply outgrew the timeline that once defined success, safety, and belonging. The clocks you were handed were built for someone else's rhythm. And for a long time, you tried to adjust yourself to match them. You waited when your intuition said move. You rushed when your spirit asked for patience. That dissonance was never failure. It was misalignment. Aquarius, you were never meant to arrive loudly. Your chapters do not open with applause. They open with recognition. The kind that happens privately when no one is watching and yet everything changes. There is a new identity settling into you now. Not declared. Not announced. Simply embodied. You no longer need the world to witness your becoming in order for it to be real. You have crossed the threshold where inner confirmation matters more than outer validation. That is not withdrawal. That is maturity. This next chapter does not ask you to prove anything. It does not require urgency or performance. It does not demand that you explain why your path looks different. It only asks one thing. That you trust the timing of your own consciousness. Because here is the truth most people never realize. The ones who change family patterns rarely do it loudly. They do it by choosing awareness over reaction. By responding instead of repeating. By refusing to carry inherited urgency into a future that does not need it. You are altering the rhythm of your lineage simply by living awake. By choosing calm where there was once chaos. By choosing clarity where there was once confusion. By choosing sustainability over struggle. And that kind of change does not announce itself. It stabilizes. It heals forward. You may notice now that the need to rush has softened. That pressure to catch up has faded. Not because you gave up, but because you finally realized there was nothing to catch. You are not behind. You are aligned. Let me ask you something quietly. If you truly believed you were right on time, what would you stop forcing today? This is where the story closes without actually ending. Not with fireworks, but with grounding. You step into the future without dragging the past behind you. You allow your life to expand without needing witnesses. You trust that what is meant to meet you will recognize you without introduction. And somewhere deep in your body, there is a knowing now. A calm certainty that you are not here to relive old cycles or carry unfinished struggles. You are here to move beyond them. Gently, consciously, fully present. You are not here to repeat the past. You are here to finally live beyond it. Stay with me for just a little longer. Not because you need more answers, but because something inside you already recognizes what is being said. Aquarius, if this message found you, it did not arrive by chance. It arrived because you were finally quiet enough to hear it. Because your spirit has reached a frequency where truth no longer has to shout. It can speak softly and still be undeniable. You have just walked through a story that was never meant to entertain you. It was meant to remember you. To remind you of who you are becoming when no one is watching. When no one is applauding. When the only witness is your own nervous system finally at ease. There is a calm strength settling into you now. Not excitement. Not urgency. But certainty. The kind that does not need permission. The kind that does not ask the world if it is allowed to exist. And here is the part that may surprise you. This calm is not the end of the journey. It is the signal that the journey is finally real. From here on, your life responds differently. Opportunities do not chase you. They recognize you. People do not need convincing. They feel your clarity before you speak. And the future does not feel heavy anymore. It feels open. If something inside you softened while listening, if your chest felt lighter, if your breath slowed without as your intuition saying, yes, this is aligned. Yes, this is you. So let me ask you, not as a creator, but as a companion on this path, what truth are you finally ready to trust without proof? If you feel called, leave a comment below. Not for me. For another Aquarius who needs to know they are not alone in this shift. And if this space feels safe, grounding, familiar in a way you cannot explain, subscribe. Because this journey is not over. It is only changing altitude. There is another message already forming. Another layer waiting to unfold. And it will arrive when you are ready to receive it. Until then, trust yourself. More than the noise. More than the old timelines. More than the fear that once kept you small. You are exactly where you need to be. And the universe knows your name. I will meet you in the next message.